There's a stretch of highway I used to drive late at night, long after most people had gone to sleep. It's quiet out there. No rush, no distractions, just the sound of tires on wet asphalt and the steady rhythm of the rain. It's supposed to be peaceful, right? But sometimes the quiet can feel too quiet. Sometimes it feels like the road is watching you, waiting for you to notice something you shouldn't. Before I go deeper into the story, welcome, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Echoes of Nightmares, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on any of the future scary tales. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button too. Also, leave a comment to let me know where you're listening from in the world. Now back to my story. This story isn't just about what I saw or what I thought I saw. It's about what I felt, and I'm not sure I'll ever understand it. All I know is, if you ever find yourself alone on a deserted highway, with the rain blurring the world around you, don't stop. I've been a trucker for nearly 20 years. I've driven through deserts where the air burns your skin, forests where the trees press so close they feel alive, and snowstorms so fierce you can't see more than a few feet in front of you. I thought I'd seen it all. But that night, that stretch of highway, it was different. It was a routine run. Just me, my rig, and a couple 100 miles of empty road. The rain had started an hour earlier, a soft patter against the windshield that quickly turned into a downpour. The kind of rain that seems to swallow the world, leaving you with nothing but the road ahead and the sound of water rushing past your tires. It should have been just another quiet night. I'd always loved the solitude of the highway. But that night, I wasn't alone. At least, it didn't feel like I was. It started small, just a feeling like something was just out of sight, waiting for me to notice it. I told myself it was the rain, the isolation. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I can't explain it. But the air felt heavy, like the rain was pressing down harder than it should. My headlights cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the endless stretch of road. And yet, I kept glancing into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something there. Someone there. I told myself to focus, to keep driving, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was as if the highway was alive, pulling me into something I couldn't quite understand. I didn't know it yet, but that night was going to change everything I thought I knew about the road. The rain kept coming down harder, drumming against the roof of the cab like a heartbeat. It was past 2:30 a.m. by then, and the highway was deserted. I hadn't seen another set of headlights in over an hour. Just me, the endless stretch of wet pavement, and the faint glow of my dashboard. I tried turning on the radio to fill the silence, but all I got was static. No music, no voices, just that crackling sound that somehow made the truck feel even emptier. I turned it off after a while. It was better to just listen to the rain, or so I thought. You'd think the rain would make you feel safe, like it's washing everything away. But out there, on that stretch of highway, it just made the world smaller. The wipers could barely keep up, and the headlights didn't seem to reach as far as they usually did. Everything felt closed in, like the road was the only thing left. That's when I saw it, a figure standing just off the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was an animal, a deer, maybe, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person. Someone standing there, in the pouring rain, soaking wet. They weren't moving, just standing. I slowed down without even thinking. I mean, what would you do? Someone out there, miles from anywhere, in the middle of the night? It didn't make sense. I figured maybe they'd had a breakdown or an accident. But as I got closer, the figure disappeared. 1 second they were there, and the next gone. No movement, no sign of them stepping off the road. Just gone. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and even leaned forward in my seat to get a better look, but there was no one there. I told myself it was the rain, maybe the reflection of something off the road. I mean, I've been driving for hours, and fatigue does strange things to your mind. But as much as I tried to brush it off, I couldn't shake the feeling. You know that sensation, like someone's watching you. That's what it felt like. Even though I was alone, I couldn't stop glancing at the mirrors, half expecting to see something or someone there. I pressed on, telling myself to focus on the road. But the hairs on the back of my neck wouldn't settle down, and the cab felt colder than it should have. I turned the heat up, but it didn't help. It wasn't just the cold, it was something else. Something I couldn't explain. About 20 minutes later, the rain let up just enough for me to see further ahead. The road stretched on, empty and lifeless, with no signs of civilization. I remember thinking how strange it was. Usually, even the remotest highways have the occasional gas station or diner, but there was nothing, just trees and darkness. And then I saw it again, the figure, standing on the side of the road, just ahead. This time, I didn't slow down. I couldn't. My hands tightened on the wheel, and my foot pressed harder on the gas. As I passed, I caught a glimpse of them, just a shape really dark and hunched over, like they were shivering. But as soon as I looked in the mirror, they were gone again. I didn't stop. I didn't even think about stopping. Whatever I'd seen, or thought I'd seen, I wasn't about to turn back. My gut told me to keep going, and for once I listened. But the further I drove, the stranger everything felt. The rain started picking up again, heavier than before, and the road seemed different. The curves felt sharper, the trees closer, and the GPS, it stopped working entirely. Just a blank screen, like it couldn't find where I was. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself it was just the storm playing tricks on me. But then the radio came back on, and what I heard, I swear to you, I hadn't touched the dial, and yet there was someone speaking, or maybe crying, through the static. I reached out to turn it off, but before I could, the voice stopped. And in its place, there was a sound I'll never forget. It sounded like it came from the back of the truck. I glanced in the mirror, but all I saw was darkness. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone was back there just out of sight. The rain had turned into a downpour by then, sheets of water hammering the windshield so hard the wipers barely made a difference. The road ahead was just a blur, a swirling mess of black and gray with faint streaks of white from the dividing lines. Every so often, my headlights caught glimpses of the trees lining the road, tall, dark, and dripping, like silent shadows leaning closer. That's when I saw the lights. Faint at first, flickering in the distance like tiny sparks in the rain. I thought it might be another vehicle, a car with its hazard lights on, maybe a broken down truck. But the closer I got, the stranger they looked. They weren't headlights. They weren't taillights. They weren't anything I'd seen before. The rain made everything harder to see, but those lights, they seemed wrong. They flickered too fast, too erratically, and they didn't stay in one place. They danced along the edge of the road, weaving in and out of the trees, like they were trying to guide me, or maybe pull me off the road. The highway felt endless now, stretching on forever without a single sign of life. No mile markers, no exit signs, not even a passing billboard. The rain blurred everything, and the road felt like it was swallowing me whole. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, my knuckles white, my eyes darting between the windshield and the mirrors. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe I didn't want to see it. When I finally saw a rest area sign, I felt a rush of relief. I wasn't sure if I should stop, but I needed a moment to breathe. The sign was faded and hard to read, but I didn't care. I pulled off the highway and rolled into the parking lot, the tires splashing through deep puddles. The place was empty, just a few vending machines under a dimly lit shelter, their lights flickering like everything else that night. I sat there for a while, listening to the rain, trying to convince myself I'd imagined everything. But then I saw it, standing under the shelter, just beyond the light. The figure, the same one I'd seen on the side of the road. They were there, clear as day this time, staring straight at me. They weren't moving, not swaying, not shivering, just standing there, watching me. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their eyes. It was like they were waiting for something, daring me to step out of the truck. And for some reason, I almost did. My hand was on the door handle before I even realized it. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at them. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. Time felt strange, like it wasn't moving right. All I knew was that I couldn't open that door. My gut screamed at me to stay put, to lock the doors and drive away. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they turned and walked away. Not back toward the road, but into the trees. They didn't run or stumble, just walked like they knew exactly where they were going. And then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness. I should have felt relieved, but I didn't. If anything, the silence made it worse. The truck felt too small, the cab too quiet. I reached for the ignition, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the key. But as soon as the engine roared to life, I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. The tap on the window was soft, almost polite, but it felt like a gunshot in the silence of the cab. My heart stopped for a second, then started pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. I didn't want to look. I couldn't look, but something made me turn my head. There was nothing there, just the rain and the reflection of my own pale, terrified face. I sat frozen for a moment, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard anything. But then I noticed something, movement in the side mirror. The figure wasn't at the shelter anymore. They were behind the truck, standing in the rain. I couldn't just sit there. Whatever was going on, I needed to know. I grabbed my flashlight from the dash, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit me like a slap, and the flashlight shook in my hand as I swung the beam toward the back of the truck. But there was no one there, just a shelter in the distance, its light flickering like it might go out any second. I walked toward it, one slow step at a time, my boots splashing in the puddles. The rain was so heavy I could barely hear my own footsteps. When I reached the shelter, I was sure I'd find them. But it was empty. No figure, no movement, nothing. Just the vending machines humming quietly, their lights flickering like dying candles. For a second, I thought I might have imagined everything. But then I saw them, the footprints. They were fresh, still wet from the rain. They started under the shelter, but didn't make sense. There were no tracks leading in, only out. It was like they'd appeared out of thin air. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at those footprints. Part of me wanted to follow them, to see where they led. But another part of me, the smarter part, told me to get back in the truck and drive. I didn't know what was out there, but I knew it wasn't good. If you were me, what would you do? Would you follow the footprints, risk finding something you can't explain? Or would you turn around, get back in the truck, and leave it all behind? Think about it. What would you really do? I told myself I'd had enough. Whatever was going on here, it wasn't my problem. I turned back toward the truck, the rain soaking me to the bone. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. The truck looked different. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but the closer I got, the more I knew something wasn't right. And then I saw it. The passenger door was open, wide open. I know I didn't leave it like that. I was sure I'd locked it, but now I wasn't so sure about anything. I climbed into the cab as fast as I could, locking the doors behind me. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel, but I started the engine and threw the truck into gear. I didn't care where I was going. I just wanted to get away. But as I pulled back onto the highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. What do you think was out there? Was it all in my head, or was something following me? I kept telling myself it was just the rain, the darkness playing tricks. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something wasn't right, and it wasn't over yet. The highway stretched ahead endlessly, the rain pounding so hard it felt like the road itself might dissolve. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my foot heavy on the gas. The wipers swiped back and forth, but the darkness swallowed everything beyond a few feet in front of me. For a while, I tried to convince myself I was safe. The shelter was miles behind me, the footprints washed away. But that feeling, the one that made my skin crawl, that had me glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, it wouldn't go away. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. It started faint, barely audible over the rain. A whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it was there. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't static. It was a voice, low and deliberate, coming from the cab. I glanced at the empty passenger seat, then at the bunk behind me. Nothing. But the whisper didn't stop. I turned up the radio to drown it out, but the static only made it worse. The whisper wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the truck. I slammed my hand on the dashboard, yelling at nothing, at no one, trying to make it stop. And for a moment it did. But that's when the radio cut out completely. The static faded, replaced by something even worse. A voice. A woman's voice, crackling like an old recording. At first, I thought it was a regular broadcast, some local station picking up through the storm. But then I heard what she was saying. A tragic crash on this highway. The driver never found, authorities warned to stay off the road during severe weather. Her words sent a chill down my spine. She was describing a crash, a semi-truck just like mine, on this very highway. The details were vague, but the way she spoke, it was like she was describing me. My truck, my route, my storm. That's when I made my biggest mistake. I glanced in the rearview mirror. I saw it, someone sitting in the back seat, just sitting there, perfectly still, watching me. My throat went dry. My chest felt like it was caving in. I whipped my head around to look, but the bunk was empty. The mirror, though, it wasn't lying. They were there. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then they leaned forward, just enough for me to see their face in the mirror. Their lips moved, and I'll never forget what they said. You should have stayed home. Their voice was calm, almost gentle, but it felt like a knife slicing through my sanity. The moment the words left their lips, everything went black. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed, staring into the void. It could have been seconds, minutes, hours. All I know is that when the lights came back on, the road ahead was empty. The figure was gone, the whispers silenced. But the fear, that stayed. What would you have done? Kept driving, hoping to escape whatever was following you? Or stopped, tried to confront it, to understand it? I kept driving, but the farther I went, the more I realized you can't outrun something like that. It follows you, no matter where you go. I don't know how long I drove after that, how many miles I passed, how many turns I took. Everything after that blackout. It's like a blur. But then, just when I thought I was free, just when I thought I had outrun whatever it was that had been following me, I found myself back at the rest area. The same one, the same damn shelter. But something was wrong. Everything was wrong. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the normal kind of quiet you get in the middle of the night. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, the kind that sets your heart racing because it doesn't feel natural. The rain had stopped, but the air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. I pulled into the lot, but the truck, my truck, was the only thing in sight. I stepped out of the truck, my boots sinking into the wet ground. There was no one there. Not a single person, not a car. It was like the world had swallowed everyone up. The footprints from earlier, the ones leading to the highway, they were gone, as if they'd never existed at all. I walked to the shelter. The roof was sagging, half of the lights flickering like dying fireflies. I thought I was losing my mind. There were no signs of life, not a soul around, and yet something felt wrong. I felt like I wasn't alone, like I was being watched, even though I couldn't see anyone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the shelter. The memories came rushing back. The figure, the whispers, the road that seemed to twist and turn on its own. I thought I was safe, but that wasn't the truth. I wasn't safe at all. Not anymore. Then, Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A flash. A figure standing in the distance at the edge of the lot. I couldn't see them clearly, but I knew who it was. The figure from the highway. The same person who had whispered to me, the one who had been in my truck. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, to get back in the truck and drive far away from here. But every part of me knew I couldn't escape. I had already crossed some line that I couldn't uncross. The figure was always there, always just out of reach. And now, I don't know if it was a ghost or a hallucination or something far worse. To this day, I don't know how I survived that night. I don't know if what I saw was real or if it was something my mind invented to cope with the terror. Maybe it was a ghost, a lost soul wandering the highway. Maybe it was something far worse, something that can't be explained. What I do know is this. I haven't driven that route since, and I don't plan to. Not now. Not ever. What do you think happened? Was it real? Or was it just my mind breaking under the pressure of the road? Have you ever been on a highway like that, where you couldn't tell where the world ended and the nightmares began? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you've seen something similar. Maybe you felt that same presence lurking just out of view. Or maybe, just maybe, you're still out there driving down a highway that's waiting for you. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something like this on the road? A strange encounter, something that made you question whether you were alone or if something else was out there, waiting for you in the dark? These kinds of stories have a way of sticking with you, don't they? Maybe it's a voice, a figure, or just the feeling of being watched, like something is hiding just beyond your reach. If you've got a story like this, something that makes you look twice when you're driving late at night, share it in the comments. Tell me what happened. Maybe it's a place you can't forget, or a feeling that's never really left you. The highway, it has a way of keeping secrets, and maybe, just maybe, you've uncovered something no one else has. I know, it's tempting to ignore these strange encounters, to convince yourself it's just the mind playing tricks or the exhaustion of the road. But when you hear the whispers, when you feel the cold breath on your neck, it becomes harder to dismiss. So, what would you do if you found yourself on that highway, in the middle of nowhere, with no one to help? Would you keep driving, hoping the nightmare passes? Or would you stop, knowing it's already too late? Subscribe to this channel if you dare. If you want more stories like this, stories that might make you think twice about that late night drive, or perhaps even check your rearview mirror a few more times. Stay with me, and maybe, just maybe, I'll share more stories that will keep you awake listening for something that shouldn't be there. Because, in the end, you can never really know what waits for you on the highway. The road that seems empty, the stretches of silence that feel unnaturally long. And when you do find something there, something watching, you can't unsee it. And I think it's already too late for you.